Good evening, everyone. Sorry I'm not real active. I've got a house full of sick people. If you remember, I was sick. I'm still recovering from it. When I did the discussion with Preston earlier, I was heavily medicated. So I still powered through it and had a good time, and I was glad to do that with him, despite the issues with my freaking dog and being somewhat sick. But excuse me. But I want to talk about what I see now is a shift in tactics for Russia, and it's to buy time. The ground forces of Ukraine are quite strong enough that they're pushing Russia back. There's a lull currently on the battlefield, and I know I'm seeing people asking me, hey, where's the maps? Where's the operations updates? The ground movements on the maps that I would show you aren't detailed enough. They don't go far enough in depth to show you what's really going on in the city by city level. So I haven't done one because there just isn't anything to show. What I showed previously looks the same. Ukrainians are still taking some towns, and they're making slow but steady progress, which is what is necessary. There are Russian and Ukrainian sources reporting the capture of multiple cities near Kherson, up still near Lyman, and movement still trying to push towards Lysychansk. But again, it's not like the big 20-kilometer swaths we saw earlier last month. So right now it's looking like there's a bit of not necessarily a lull, but perhaps the Ukrainians are figuring out what their next move is, where their next big punch will come, their big blow to Russia will come from. In the meantime, Russia has changed its tactics, and that's kind of what I want to talk about. Before I get to that, big thanks to someone who donated $150. We're at $3,995, so that's awesome for Action Against Hunger, and I am kicking myself that I didn't mention that during the live event because he has like 10 times more followers than I do. And boy, it would have been really nice to mention that, and I completely forgot and spaced it. But anyways, continue to drive on with that. But looking at Russia's current tactics, at least in the last couple of days, they've used the same scenario. They've launched missiles into populated city areas aiming at infrastructure. And I talked a bit about this on Preston's sit-down discussion I had with him. This idea of what the Russians are aiming to do with such strikes. So there's a couple things. The one thing that I didn't mention is the Russians are trying to buy time. The Kremlin is trying to buy time among its own community, among the Russian community, its own country. They want to seem like they're making progress by showing on TV they're hitting targets, by showing on to the Russian populace that, look, we're firing these rockets, we're hitting power structures, we're hitting city centers, etc. Now, some of those targets, there's an argument to be made here, and I'm not sure what the real cause is. The reality is I've heard many very credible sources say that Russia is out of precision munitions. I've heard a few sort of credible sources from Russia say they aren't. But that leaves you with one of two scenarios. One, the Russians are firing rockets and missiles into Kyiv, Kharkiv, other places, and they're hitting non-military structures, non-military critical structures. I mean, since the beginning of this war, we've seen missiles hit shopping malls, civilian train stations, parks, playgrounds, hospitals, theaters, cultural sites, residential areas, and apartments. And I know they had precision munitions in the initial stages of the war when they were doing this. So this idea that they are just accidentally missing, I don't buy it. I don't buy that Russia's accidentally missing. I believe they're trying to cause terror. And there's a bit of contention on the YouTube comments on Preston's feed when I said those things, when I was talking about the fact that either they are using precision munitions to target legit civilian infrastructure such as children's playgrounds, or they're out of precision munitions and they're firing and missing by a kilometer or more. So I think it's a mix of both. I think they likely are missing, but even with standard rockets, the math is such that you're likely going to hit within a certain radius. But they're also targeting these things because they've targeted them this whole war. So I don't want to hear these excuses that, oh, no, Russia's actually targeting military infrastructure and they're just missing. Bullshit. Have they been missing this whole freaking time? Are there precision, quote unquote, precision munitions so poor that they've missed all the time since the beginning? I don't think so. So that's where we're at, though, in this war. And the reason they're trying to buy time is because missiles protect the Russians. You can kill a bunch of Ukrainians using missiles with a couple people loading and firing it. And as you've seen before, the Russians are firing them from beyond the borders of Ukraine, which makes it difficult for Ukraine to respond, which means that Russian soldiers die less, and the unfortunate ratio of Ukrainians dying to Russian missiles is not going to match the Ukrainian soldiers killing Russians on the battlefield. And the way Russia is set up with their rocket forces is they could continue this for a long time. And really the only defense that Ukraine has, or the only action they can take, is their missile defenses. Anything that we can get them in the West. And it was interesting because 3 weeks ago, President Zelensky sat down with military planners and he outlined his number one priority. It was very fascinating that he almost saw this coming, and he said that despite the achievements in Kharkiv, because this was earlier in the phases of the attack, the counter-offensive that Ukraine started, he said despite those achievements, they need to continue to receive a flow of military equipment from the West. And the top priority, the very top priority, was missile defense systems, so that he could keep Russian missiles out from hitting, or as many as he can. Hitting a missile with a missile is very difficult. Keeping the air assets from being able to do that would be something that he wanted, and he saw that. And so we are now seeing that those Iranian drones are coming into play. Iranian drones are easy targets for missile defenses, but there are clearly holes in Ukraine's missile defense systems where that Russia is exploiting, that they can get in and cause havoc to the civilian population. The other thing is Russia wants to try to disrupt the connection of the European flow of electricity from Ukraine into the EU. That connection is somewhat of a buffer for the oncoming energy. I wouldn't call it a crisis, but the impending energy pain that they're going to feel. Prices are going to go up. General Ben Hodges lives in Germany. He spoke to CNBC about this, saying that he's quite impressed with how well Germany has prepared. It's not going to be catastrophic, but it's not going to be easy either. So it's not just going to be business as usual. So that's Putin's intent. He wants to sever the electricity ties from Ukraine moving into European nations that traditionally relied on Russian energy. He doesn't want Europe getting its energy from anyone else. Putin wants the pain to be felt in the European countries. That's why we're seeing articles talk about Europe gathering wood for the upcoming winter. So if he can drive a wedge between Europe and Ukraine, or even countries within Europe and each other over energy, he's going to exploit that, which is why some of these missiles are targeting energy infrastructure within Ukraine, because that energy infrastructure within Ukraine supplies the European Union. Now, it's not a huge amount, but every little bit helps when Putin's trying to calculate a way to divorce the West from Ukraine so that he can get what he wants. And that's his aim. That's what's going on. So we're going to continue to probably see a lot of these missile and rocket attacks in the near term. I don't know how long it's going to last, but it's a tactic that generally plays well to the TV, but also keeps his soldiers from dying and can have an effect.